All right, this is a presentation on words, their meanings, and the semantic ranges that they present themselves in. This is for BI 500. I want to talk about the idea of, as you're doing your Bible study, you're doing your work in various passages, and I want to talk about what it means to start to look at words and do word studies and what this means. So we're going to start with the idea that we're reading a particular passage. We're going to call that our target passage. So you're maybe reading in, whether you're reading in Galatians chapter 4, or you're reading in Amos, or you're reading an Old Testament passage or something like that. That's what we like to call our target passage. And as you're reading your passage, you might notice that there's a particular word or phrase that, depending on how that word or phrase is used, is going to affect the meaning of the passage. Or you might be reading, and as you're doing your studying, you're looking at different translations, and you notice that different translations translate the same term differently. Now that tells you that there's some semantic range to your term. Now I've given you an example here from Hebrews 5:14, in which two terms that are from the same cognate group are used. Solid food is for the mature, and therefore let us leave the elementary doctrine of Christ and go on to maturity. Now that's from the ESV. You'll notice if you from the New Revised Standard or from the New American Standard, it might read, let us leave the elementary teachings of the Messiah or the Christ and move on to perfection. And so here we have a juicy term. We have in our target passage, we have a word or phrase that makes a difference in how it's translated. A couple of things about this. When we talk about different ways that this term can be translated, we're talking about the semantic range of a term. And it just so happens that for teleos, you might see it translated as either perfect or mature or complete or fully grown or finished, something like that. So that's something that we need to take into consideration. Another term that is going to come up as we look at word studies is this idea of a term and its cognate group. Now what that means is, like for example, teleos up here, solid food is for the teleos, the mature or the complete or the perfect. Teleos is an adjective, but it also shows up as a noun. So like teleates is a noun form of teleos. It's part of the cognate group. We'll also note that there are various verbs that are formed by using teleos, like the verb teleao. Now, nouns, adjectives, and verbs that are formed from the same root are called a cognate group. So sometimes it's helpful to do a search on a cognate group, which is what this little asterisk here is for, to search for a cognate group to determine the various ways it can be used. All right, so that's our target passage. That's how we identify a significant word or phrase. Now, what's our first place we look? What we're going to find is that the best way to figure out what a term means, and terms only mean what authors use them as. So, to look within our first search, we want to look from within the book itself. So, in Hebrews, you're going to see that there are 12 occurrences of the teleos cognate group. I've listed them below. Now, Hebrews is a standalone. The author of Hebrews arguably has not written anything else in the New Testament, but let's say you're searching for something like in Paul. You're reading Galatians 4, you're looking at the term adoption. You not only would look in the book of Galatians, you would also look in the broader corpus of the Pauline corpus. So look at what the author has said and how the author uses that term. So that would be an example of how you might look in there. Now you can find the occurrences of this cognate group by using your online tools or your Bible software or something like that. Or a concordance for that matter. Okay, another place you would go as we widen this search, we might look at how the word is used in the broader New Testament. So not just how does the author of Hebrews use this term, or if you're looking in Paul, how does Paul use this term, but how do all the other uses of the term occur in the New Testament? We find that there are 48 uses in the New Testament. And as we're doing this, what we're looking for places where it's a similar context as it might be used in Hebrews 5:14 or 6:1. And so, like an example, 1 Corinthians 2:6 uses not only the perfection language of teleos, but also language like solid food and things like that. So there might be a parallel there. Philippians 3:12 also has 3:12 and 15 have maybe a similar use of teleos. So we look to passages outside of our context to see if they can bring some light onto this. But start with the author, start with what they've written, start with the book itself, move out into the New Testament. And as we move beyond the New Testament, we can see, well, maybe the author is affected by how this term is used from a different context. So, like the Old Testament, sometimes the uses of terms from the Old Testament affect how the New Testament is written. So the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, might be a good place where you could look at how this term occurs. So you could search that. We find that there are 63 occurrences of the teleos cognate group in the Septuagint. By the way, the Septuagint does include the Apocrypha as well. And the way you can access this is by either using a paper book concordance of the Septuagint, or again, by using Bible software like BibleWorks, which is available on Fuller campuses. Going beyond the use of the Septuagint, you might look at the broader Jewish world in and around the first century. And we'll be talking about what is Jewish literature and what does that look like, but some examples of Jewish literature are examples of the author like Philo, or the example of the author like Josephus, or the collection of books that is called the Pseudepigrapha. And we can see that Philo really likes this term. Josephus not as much, and the Pseudepigrapha also not as much. But you could look at the examples on how these are used outside of the New Testament in the Jewish literature of the first century and see if that has any parallels to how the term is being used in your particular target passage. As we move even beyond that area, we'll notice that we have these concentric circles that are expanding. Now we're looking at the broader Greco-Roman world, the literature of the Greco-Roman world around the New Testament. And in order to access this material, we look at lexicons like Bauer, Danker, Arndt, and Gingrich, or BDAG, or the classical Greek lexicon of Liddell and Scott. Another place you can do a word search and look at how this term is used outside of the Bible and in the Greco-Roman world is this website for a TLG website, Thesaurus Lingua Graeca. And this can be a deep well that you're jumping into, the Greco-Roman usage of the term. But there are some resources that I'll make available to you as to how to access that particular world. Now, there's also a way to do this if you don't have all the time or the intent to do a broad word search on your own. You can go to some word studies that have been done for New Testament studies, like the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, or TDNT. It's a big 11-volume blue thick books. You can get them fairly cheap. They're obviously in the library, etc., etc. And this takes a Greek term, and the cognate group, and it gives a word study. It goes through all of these steps of word study, and it digests it for you. You could also do the New International Dictionary of New Testament Theology, which is edited by Colin Brown. And this goes from English and looks at English terms and what the Greek terms are behind them. Now, these are helpful, and I would encourage you to use them, but of course, what we want to encourage in this class is we want to encourage you engaging the New Testament and the Old Testament on your own, doing word studies on your own. And so these are good things to go to after you've done your initial footwork of trying to determine what the word means in its particular context. So this was an example of how to go from a target passage looking at a significant word, and then where do you go? How is the meaning of a term derived from the usage around the passage that you are in?